Hi guys, hope you all doing well. Welcome back to our series of Microsoft Graph, and in this video we are going to write a script from scratch that will be used to query Microsoft Graph. Now the very first thing that you need to access any information that's been protected by Microsoft Graph is an application. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my browser where I have signed in as global admin, and then I went to Azure Active Directory, and now I have selected app registration, and I'm going to register a brand new app. Let's say I'm going to access Graph through a script, so I'll name it as Graph script. Okay, I'm not going to make any change here. Here I will select web option itself, and here I'm going to type HTTPS and then let's say local host. That's all. That's all I need as of now. Okay, and I have clicked on register. As of now, an application is registered in my Azure AD, but still this application doesn't have the required permission to access Graph API. Now there is a prerequisite which is must, and that is you should know how OAuth client credential flow works. So if you have not seen that video by any chance, please go ahead and watch that video, because there are multiple things which I'm going to use as a reference in this video, which I have already covered. Specifically, the attributes or the values that needs to be present when your request is reaching a specific endpoint of your Azure AD. Okay, so as of now, I have just created an application. The next step is to copy this application ID, because this is something which we will be using in our script. Okay, so this is my client ID, and then I'll create a client secret as well, because again this is something which is required for client credential flow wherein there is no user interaction. Okay, now I'll come back to my console where we have access portal.azure.com, and in this application what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow this application to access an API which will be Microsoft Graph. Okay, and let's assume we will use this script to query user information. Okay, but since we are using client credential flow and there is no user interaction, delegated permissions are not going to work. So now what you need to do is you have to click on this option which says Microsoft Graph, and then click on application permissions, and then scroll down and go to the user section, and here give this permission which says user.read all. That's all you need to do. Okay, now again, since there will be no user interaction, that means the consent prompt will not be shown. Okay, so the fact is that if consent is not shown, then the required permission cannot be granted by any user. That means as an admin you have to grant this permission for your tenant, and that's exactly what I have done by clicking on this option which says grant admin consent for ConceptsWork. Now as of now, the configuration that is required from Azure AD perspective is done. That means I need a client ID and I need a client secret. That's it. But the fact is that if you guys remember when we have discussed about OAuth client credential flow, there is a specific endpoint which is used and which is called the token endpoint. Okay, and that can be accessed, or you can check that information by going to well-known configuration of your tenant. Now how to access this particular endpoint? Just go to your application or go to that section from where you create application, click on endpoints, and then there will be an option of well-known configuration for OpenID Connect. As you can see, this is the link which I have opened here, but this is v1.0. Now you can use v1.0 endpoints or v2.0 endpoints as well, but honestly speaking, using v2.0 endpoints here will not going to make any difference, because since there is no consent, so there is no fundamental of using an endpoint that uses incremental consent. It's very simple. But there will be no interaction that can be approved by your application, and there is no user interaction. So if you will use the v1.0 endpoints as well, everything will be in place. There will be no difference. Okay, so now let's come back to our Visual Studio Code where we will be writing our first script from scratch. Okay, now let's say you're going to give this a script to any of your customer or any of your team members as well, and let's say you want to make this a script available to anyone who can use this to just query the user information. In that case, you don't know who is going to access or who is going to use this particular script. Then what you can do, you can just define a variable, let's say tenant, and you can prompt your user to enter their domain name. Okay, so as of now, what it will do, it will ask the user to enter the tenant name. That's all I have done. I have declared a variable wherein I'm asking the user to enter their tenant name. Now this script is as of now saved in D script lab on my machine, and the script name is graph. So I'll go to my PowerShell and I will run this script to see what's exactly happening. So this is my PowerShell console, and I'm at the same location, which is dscript lab. And now if I'll try to run this, let's see what happens. Nothing is happening as of now because I hope it's not saved. So I saved it again, and now let me run this. So as you can see, as a user, now I'm getting the prompt. Okay, and the expected behavior is that this value will just get saved in this particular variable. Okay, now since we need to know which endpoint we have to reach, okay, that means we have to access this particular endpoint from our script to know the token endpoint, because that is something which will be used in client credential flow. But since the naming convention of this particular endpoint ends up with OpenID, so let's declare a variable and name it as OpenID. Okay, and then what we will do is we'll ask PowerShell to initiate a REST method and reach this particular URI, which is the OpenID Connect well-known configuration. So if I'll copy this value from here and I'll come back to my script, let me save that value here. And instead of conceptswork.com, what you should use the value which the user has entered. Okay. So this was pretty much simple, that we have just declared a variable, and this variable will be used to access a particular link, and the value of tenant is the same value which the user will be entering. Okay, now let's display this variable on the console and let's see what all we get. Okay, so if I'll again reinitiate the script and if I'll do conceptswork.com, let's see what happens. Perfect, we are getting all the endpoint list. But the fact is that this is the endpoint which we have to reach. So now instead of displaying everything, what we'll say, just display the access token, or sorry, the token endpoint. Okay, we'll again save this and now we'll again reinitiate our script and let's see. Perfect, this is what we are getting. Okay, to make it more interactive, what you can do is you can display it like this. Let's say ride-host the token endpoint of your directory is, and then this endpoint. Okay, so let's say conceptswork.com, the token endpoint of directory is this one. Now the fact is that, see, even if I type microsoft.com here, it is going to work. You see the squid value is getting changed. So we have done the first step of just querying the endpoint that we have to reach. That's all we have done as of now. Okay, but we are going to use this value multiple times. So let's save this value as well to, let's say, token endpoint itself. Let's name it a new variable where we are requesting the access token, and let's save this value here. Okay, now if you guys remember when we were talking about OAuth client credential flow, there is a specific set of information that should reach this endpoint, which is the token endpoint, and that is client ID, client secret, redirect URI, and then the grant type as client credential, because then only we are letting the Azure AD know that we are using client credential flow. Correct? So now what we are going to do is we are going to declare an object, let's say body, because this is going to include multiple set of information. And in this, I'm going to add my client ID. And client ID is the same value which we have already copied from Azure AD. Okay, and I'll paste that value here. Then the next thing that we need is client secret. Okay, and that is also something which we have already copied. So what I'll do is I'll name a new value here as client underscore secret, and then I will give my client secret value. Okay, now there is a specific value which is required, and that is redirect URI, which we have already saved in our configuration. So we'll again declare the same value, redirect URI, and what it was, HTTPS localhost. Now the method that we are going to use is client credential, so a new value which will be grant underscore type, and then it will be client credential. Okay, now make sure that you enter the values similarly as I am entering them right now or as I am typing them, because everything is as it is. That means it has to be used like this. This is something which is defined or which Azure AD expects. Okay, so don't customize these values. You may end up a scenario wherein your script might not work. Okay, the resource that we will be accessing will be graph. Okay, so what I'll do is graph.microsoft.com, and this value which I'm going to mention now, which is tenant, is basically an optional value. If you want, you can mention it. If you don't want it, you should leave it. So what I'm doing as of now, I'm sending the same value which the user has entered. Okay, as of now, we know the endpoint, we know the values which we have to send. Okay, but the fact is that no token is requested. Okay, so let's say to make it more interactive, what I'm doing is write host requesting access token. Okay, requesting access token, and the question comes how to request. Let's name it a new variable here and name it as request, and then let's ask this variable to invoke a REST method and reach URI, which is what, our token endpoint, which is $.token, and then in the body use all this information. So use the body object, and then in the method what you have to do is you have to post this information. Okay, that means what, this request value, sorry, this request variable will get some information, right? So let's write this request variable in the console and let's see what's happening now. Okay, so I will do conceptswork.com, and as you can see, I am getting access token. Again, this is the section which is actually consisting the entire access token. So now what I'll say, just display the access token part, save it, clear the screen, again run the script, and let's see now what we are getting. Perfect. So the token endpoint of your directory is this one, and this is requesting access token. This is the access token which we have received. Now see, the agenda of this video is not to let you know how to write the most efficient script. The agenda of this video is to let you know how to begin with scripting and how you can use a very small script and the easiest authentication method flow by using client credential to access Microsoft Graph API. Many of you would already know 10,000 different ways to make it more efficient. It's absolutely perfect. Please let me know in the comment section as well. But this is exceptionally basic. I'm trying to explain each and every line and what exactly I'm doing. Okay, so as of now, we have just requested the access token. We know the token endpoint. Now the final step is to query graph. Okay, Now in this variable, I'm going to add the endpoint, which is more over related for graph. Let's say graph.microsoft.com/beta endpoint and then reach users. Okay. But the fact is that there should be some authorization that should be present. That means this request that has to reach to this particular endpoint should have the authorization of the access token. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new variable as API, and in this API variable what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke a REST method, and in this REST method what should be present is the authorization header that should contain the access token. Okay, so now I'm going to use a switch which is named as headers, and inside this header I'm going to use a specific keyword called authorization, and then what I'm saying that include a keyword named as bearer and then include the value inside the token which we have received. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll include that particular value by keeping it in braces, and what we have to actually send is this particular access token. Okay, so I'll copy this value here. Now the next thing is we know the URI where we have to reach, so we'll type URI and then we'll say $graph. Okay, this is where you have to go. Okay, but still there is something missing, and that is the last part wherein which HTTP method I should use, and that is get. So what does this actually mean? That get all the users from this particular endpoint by using this access token. Okay, now the question comes that this variable will get something in response. Okay, so let's display this particular variable on the console. I have just saved my script. I'll come back to PowerShell and I'll again initiate the same script, and let's see what happens. And as you can see, I'm getting the value. But again, the entire details is in the value section. So what I'll do is I'll say, show me the values inside value. Okay. I'll again initiate the same script, ConceptsWork.com, and let's see what happens. And as you can see, I'm getting all the information. Now let's say I don't want all this information to be displayed. So what I can do is I can say select, let's say user principal name, and let's say account enabled. Okay, I'll save this and I'll again come back and I'll again reinitiate my script. Let's say conceptswork.com, and let's see what happens. Perfect, I'm getting much more organized information. Okay, now not only this, those who are super awesome with PowerShell scripting, they can use different methods. Likewise, you can simply do convert hyphen to JSON, depending upon your requirement, what kind of information you need, how you want it to be structured. Now, these are all different methods which are available with PowerShell. So if you already have good knowledge of scripting, you can do n number of customization in terms of the data that your script is getting back from this particular API. These are some very small options which I'm trying to showcase you guys to query all the set of information. Now let's say we have discussed how to access users. Okay, then you can do all the customization. But let's say if now you try to access devices. Okay, I have saved this. Let's see what happens. And the most expected error is that I will get a prompt which will say insufficient privileges. But let's see what happens. As you can see, this is exactly what I'm getting. Okay, so now if I'll go back to my portal, okay, and let's say I'm granting this permission as well. So I'll go to API permission section, and then I'll click on add permission, and again I'll click on Microsoft Graph, and then I'll click on application permission, and I'll go to the devices section, and let's say I'm giving this permission to device read all, and then again click on this option which says grant admin consent, click on yes, wait for 20-30 seconds, and then again reinitiate your script. If it is still giving you error, then you have to just wait for a couple of minutes. Provided you have granted the right permission, it should work. So I again got the error. Let's wait for 10 seconds, or let's just give it one more try without waiting. Let's see what happens. No, it's still, there's a lag. Let's come back here. Let's just refresh this permission, and let's come back here, clear the screen, graph, ConceptsWork.com, and let's see. Perfect. Okay, so you see this data which I'm getting is disorganized. Now the reason behind that is the devices object will not have these attributes, right? So I'll remove this, I'll save this, and I'll again come back, clear screen, again run the script, ConceptsWork.com. That's it. Now I'm getting the device information. Okay, so as we move along with this entire playlist, I'll let you know different methods that you can use to access different kind of information through Microsoft Graph. Okay, so this was all about knowing how to begin with writing a script, that you can use to access Microsoft Graph API. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. And as we move along with this entire playlist, whatever script I will be creating or I will be using to demonstrate any of the feature, that is something that I'm going to add in the community section. Okay, so if you guys have learned something new, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Bye bye.